I used to think control was the enemy of love. Now I'd give anything to feel that kind of care again. Because I didn't just lose Brandon in Italy. I lost the only man who ever planned a future for me. I still tell myself it wasn't cheating. Not really. Marco and I just talked at that wine bar in Rome, his eyes holding mine like Brandon's used to when we first met. But sitting here in my childhood bedroom at 31, scrolling through Instagram photos of Brandon with his new girlfriend in Santorini, I know I destroyed the best thing in my life for a fantasy that lasted exactly 48 hours. My name is Sophia, and 6 months ago I threw away a 2-year relationship with the only man who ever truly loved me, all because I thought I deserved more, thought I was settling, thought that finding myself meant finding someone else. Now I work double shifts at a restaurant I swore I'd never return to, living with parents who can barely look at me, while Brandon lives the life we planned together, just with someone who actually appreciated him. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about Italy, about the moment I confused attention with love and destroyed everything real in my life. The trip was Brandon's idea. 2 weeks in Italy, Rome, Florence, Venice, the Amalfi Coast. He'd been planning it for months, showing me hotels and restaurants, creating spreadsheets with color-coded activities. Classic Brandon, turning romance into a project management exercise. I used to find it endearing. By the time we were packing, it just felt suffocating. "I've booked us a wine tasting in Tuscany," he said, folding his clothes with military precision. "And there's this amazing restaurant in Venice with a 2-month waiting list. But I called and—" "Brandon," I interrupted, throwing clothes haphazardly into my suitcase, "can we maybe leave some room for spontaneity?" He looked hurt, that puppy dog expression that had stopped being cute somewhere around our 1-year mark. "I just want it to be perfect for you." Perfect. Everything with Brandon had to be perfect. Perfect dinners at restaurants I hadn't chosen. Perfect weekend trips planned down to the minute. Perfect gifts that showed he listened but never quite understood. He paid for everything, insisted on it actually, because his tech job paid 3 times what I made in marketing. I'd stopped fighting him on it months ago. It was easier to let him feel like the provider he desperately wanted to be. Or maybe that's just what I tell myself now. Maybe he was just generous, and I was ungrateful. Maybe the control I felt was just care I couldn't appreciate. The truth shifts depending on how much wine I've had, how lonely the night feels. The first week of the trip was exactly what I'd expected. Beautiful, orchestrated, suffocating. Brandon had planned every moment, from sunrise visits to avoid crowds to dinner reservations at places I couldn't pronounce. He took 1,000 photos of me, always wanting the perfect shot for his Instagram, always captioning them with something about his beautiful girlfriend or the love of his life. I smiled in every photo, but inside I was screaming. It wasn't that Brandon was bad to me. He was wonderful, too wonderful. He treated me like a porcelain doll, something precious and breakable that needed constant care. Every door held open, every chair pulled out, every decision made with my comfort in mind. He'd ask what I wanted, then gently steer me toward what he'd already planned, always knowing better, always taking care of everything. Or was he? Memory is a tricky thing when guilt rewrites the past. Maybe he asked and I never answered. Maybe he planned because I couldn't decide. Maybe I'm painting him as controlling now to justify what I did later. The mind does strange things when you need to be the victim in your own story. "You're so lucky," my friend Jessica had said before we left. "Brandon's like the perfect boyfriend. He literally worships you." That was the problem. I didn't want to be worshipped. I wanted to be seen. Everything changed on day 10. Brandon had caught some kind of stomach bug from the street food he'd insisted on trying despite my warnings. While he groaned in our hotel room, I decided to explore Rome alone for the first time all trip. The freedom was intoxicating. No schedule, no plan. No Brandon hovering over my shoulder asking if I was comfortable, if I needed water, if I wanted to rest. I wandered the streets aimlessly, ducking into shops and cafes on impulse, feeling like myself for the first time in months. That's when I found the wine bar. Tiny, tucked away on a side street, filled with locals instead of tourists. I ordered a glass of something red and expensive, feeling rebellious spending money without Brandon there to insist on paying. "American?" The voice was accented, amused. I turned to find a man at the next table, maybe mid-30s, with the kind of casual elegance Italian men seem born with. Dark hair, darker eyes, a smile that suggested secrets. "Is it that obvious?" I asked. "The way you hold your glass?" he said, moving to my table without asking. "Americans always look like they're afraid it will break. Some people say cheating starts when the first secret is kept. If that's true, I cheated the second Marco sat down beside me. Not with my body, but with my intentions. And sometimes that's worse." His name was Marco. "A photographer," he said, showing me his camera like it was an extension of himself. We talked for hours about art, travel, the difference between tourists and travelers. He listened when I spoke, really listened, not just waiting for his turn to talk or to offer solutions to problems I wasn't asking him to solve. "You're different from American women I've met," he said as the bar started to empty. "There's something untamed about you." Untamed. When was the last time anyone had seen me as anything but Brandon's girlfriend, Brandon's perfectly cared-for accessory? I didn't go back to the hotel until nearly 3 a.m. Brandon was asleep, surrounded by water bottles and medication I'd dutifully set out for him before leaving. I slipped into bed beside him, my mind racing, Marco's number burning in my phone like a guilty secret. The next day, Brandon felt better. He apologized profusely for ruining our plans, promising to make it up to me with an extra day in Rome. That's when the idea formed. Terrible and thrilling in equal measure. "Actually," I said over breakfast, watching him cut my pancakes like I was a child, "I've been thinking, what if I stayed a few extra days, alone?" His fork paused mid-air. "Alone? Why?" I need some time to think, about us, about where we're going." "We can think together," he said, that edge of panic creeping into his voice. "That's what couples do." "Brandon, I need space, just a few days, to figure some things out." His face went through a series of emotions, confusion, hurt, anger, before settling on that patient understanding that drove me crazy. "Is this about something I did? Because if I've been too—" "It's not about you," I lied. "It's about me. I need to find myself." God, even saying it out loud sounded like a cliché. But Brandon nodded slowly, processing this like he processed everything, methodically, looking for the logical solution. "Okay," he said finally, "but I've already paid for our flight home, and the hotel checkout is—" "I'll figure it out," I said quickly. "I'll pay for my own extension, my own flight back." That's when something shifted in his expression. For the first time in 2 years, Brandon looked at me like he was actually seeing me, not the idea of me he'd built in his head. "If you're staying to find yourself," he said quietly, "then you should do it on your own. Financially, too." I stared at him, shocked. This wasn't the Brandon who insisted on paying for everything, who got genuinely upset if I tried to pick up a check. This was someone else, someone with a backbone I hadn't known existed. "You're seriously not going to help me?" I asked. "Help you do what, exactly? Stay in Rome without me to think about us?" "No, Sophia. If you need space from me, then you need space from my wallet, too." The words stung more than they should have. When had I become someone who expected him to fund my independence? Our last day together was torture. We went through the motions. The Colosseum, the Trevi Fountain, a final dinner at a restaurant he'd booked weeks ago. But something had broken between us. Brandon was polite, even kind, but the puppy dog eagerness was gone. He wasn't trying to fix things, wasn't offering solutions. He was just done. That night, lying in our hotel bed with 3 feet of space between us, I texted Marco. Just to have options, I told myself, just to see. The next morning, Brandon left for the airport alone. He'd offered to share a taxi, but I'd declined, still clinging to this idea of independence I'd suddenly decided I needed. He kissed my forehead at the hotel entrance, a goodbye that felt final, and then he was gone. The hotel kicked me out 2 hours later. Of course, Brandon had only paid through that morning. Of course, he'd taken me literally about being financially independent. I stood in the lobby with my suitcase, credit cards nearly maxed, suddenly realizing how much I'd taken for granted. Marco answered on the second ring. "The American girl who holds her wine glass carefully," he said, and I could hear his smile. "I wondered if you would call." We met at the same wine bar. In daylight, it looked smaller, shabbier. Marco looked different too, older, his charm more practiced than natural. But I was committed to this path now, to proving I hadn't just thrown away my relationship for nothing. "You left your boyfriend?" he asked, pouring wine despite the early hour. "We're taking a break," I said, the words sour in my mouth. "I need to figure out what I want." "And what do you want?" I wanted to go home. I wanted Brandon to text me, to beg me to come back, to fight for us the way he fought to make everything perfect. But my phone stayed silent, and Marco's hand was on my knee, and I'd already destroyed everything anyway. "Show me your Rome," I said instead. The next 2 days were a blur of wine and wandering, of Marco's hands and mouth and promises that meant nothing. He had an artist's eye and a player's heart, showing me hidden corners of the city while spinning stories about la dolce vita and following your passion. I let myself believe it was romantic, that this was what I'd been missing with Brandon's structured itineraries and careful planning. But when I mentioned needing a place to stay, Marco's expression cooled. "I have roommates," he said vaguely. "It's complicated." When I asked about seeing each other back in America, he laughed. "You Americans, always planning the future. Can't we just enjoy now?" When my credit card was declined at dinner and I looked at him helplessly, he shrugged. "I'm an artist, Bella. I live simply." The fantasy crumbled so fast I got whiplash. This wasn't romance. It was a fling with a man who saw me as a tourist to charm, not a person to know. Brandon had seen me as a person. He'd just seen me too well, cared too much, tried too hard to make me happy. I maxed out my last credit card on a flight home, choosing a red-eye 3 days earlier than originally planned. Marco didn't even come to see me off. Just sent a text with a kissy face emoji and "Ciao, Bella." 2 days of passion, and that's all I meant to him. An anecdote, a conquest, a story, to tell the next lonely tourist. The flight home was the longest of my life. 13 hours to think about what I'd done, what I'd thrown away. I thought about Brandon on his flight 3 days earlier. Had he been relieved? Heartbroken? Had he known somehow about Marco? I practiced speeches in my head. Apologies, explanations, promises to do better. I'd tell him about the pressure I'd felt, how his perfection made me feel imperfect, how his constant care felt like control. We could work through it. Couples worked through worse all the time, but when I landed and turned on my phone, there was only one message from Brandon. "Your things are packed. You can pick them up Tuesday between 2 to 4. Please text first." No questions about my flight, no concern for my safety, no anger or accusations. Just cold logistics, the project manager handling one final task. I took an Uber to our apartment. His apartment, really, though I'd lived there for a year. My key didn't work. Of course it didn't. I sat on the steps and called him, my hands shaking. "I changed the locks," he said without preamble. "Your things are in boxes by the door." "Brandon, please, can we talk?" We had 2 years to talk, Sophia. You chose to have that conversation with yourself in Rome instead. "Nothing happened," I lied, the words ash in my mouth. "I just needed—" "Stop." His voice was tired, not angry. Somehow that was worse. I know about Marco. My blood froze. How? You posted an Instagram story, wine glasses, two shadows. You're not as careful as you think. The wine bar. I'd posted it thinking Brandon wouldn't see, forgetting he checked my stories obsessively, part of his need to be involved in every moment of my life. For once, his attention to detail had worked in his favor. It wasn't what it looked like. I tried desperately. We just talked. I don't care anymore, he interrupted. I spent the whole flight home thinking about us, about what I did wrong. But you know what I realized? I didn't do anything wrong. I loved you, Sophia. I tried to make you happy, and you threw it away because you were bored. I wasn't bored, I protested. I was suffocated. You planned everything, controlled everything. Did I? His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. It doesn't matter anymore. Please, I begged. Let me come home. We can work through this. There is no we to work through. This isn't your home. Your things will be ready on Tuesday. How can you be so cold? I asked, tears streaming down my face. Cold? He paused, and for a moment I thought he might explain, might engage, but all he said was, Tuesday, between 2 and 4, text first. He hung up. When I tried to call back, I was blocked. I gathered my things that Tuesday, boxes neatly labeled in Brandon's precise handwriting. He wasn't there. He'd arranged to be at work, avoiding even that final confrontation. Inside one box, I found all the photos from Italy, the ones he'd taken so carefully of me at every monument and meal. There was a note on top in his writing. Thought you might want these for your memories. It was the cruelest kindness he could have offered. My parents let me move back home, their disappointment palpable. Brandon was such a nice boy, my mother said daily. So responsible, so devoted to you. I know, I wanted to scream. That was the problem. Except it wasn't, was it? The problem was me, unable to appreciate what I had, always looking for something more exciting, more spontaneous, more... I didn't even know. Finding a new apartment in Seattle was impossible on my salary alone. I'd forgotten how expensive life was when you weren't splitting rent with someone who insisted on paying more because he earned more. Job hunting was brutal too. My position had been eliminated while I was gone, my boss coolly informing me that my extended absence had made them realize they could redistribute my duties. It wasn't until later I remembered she played on the same charity tennis circuit as Brandon's mother. A coincidence, I'm sure. Brandon must have told people. Not maliciously, just honestly, the way he did everything. Word spread through our friend group, twisted in the telling. I became the girl who cheated on perfect Brandon in Italy, who threw away a good man for a vacation fling. The few friends who reached out wanted details, gossip, not support. I mean, what were you thinking? My former best friend Amy asked over coffee. Brandon literally worshipped you. Do you know how many girls would kill for a guy like that? I knew. God, I knew. Social media became torture. Brandon, who'd rarely posted before, suddenly had a whole new life online. Hiking trips with friends I'd never met. Cooking classes he'd wanted us to take together. Smiling in photos with a casualness I'd never seen when we were together, like my leaving had lifted some weight off his shoulders. Or was it performance? The timing was too perfect, the happiness too curated. Every post seemed designed to show me what I'd lost, positioned to catch maximum light on his newfound joy. Brandon had always been meticulous. Why would his revenge be any different? Then, 3 months after Italy, she appeared. Lauren. Blonde where I was brunette, petite where I was tall, smiling up at Brandon in photos with genuine joy instead of posed perfection. They went to farmers' markets together, something I'd always found boring. She cooked him elaborate meals, posting photos of him laughing in the kitchen, flower in his hair. They took a weekend trip to Vancouver, no spreadsheets in sight, just spontaneous selfies and inside jokes I didn't understand. Lauren doesn't need Brandon to plan everything. She plans things with him. That's the difference. She's his partner. I was his project. 6 months later, they were in Santorini. The trip Brandon had mentioned wanting to take for our 3-year anniversary. The proposal spot he'd probably already researched, the ring he'd probably already started saving for. But it was Lauren standing against that blue-domed church. Lauren's hand sporting a diamond. Lauren living the life I'd thrown away. I used to imagine Brandon proposing to me there, on one knee, telling me he'd loved me since our second date. Now I can't even picture it without seeing Lauren's face instead of mine. I found out through Instagram, of course. The photo was perfect without trying too hard. Just them, happy, with a simple caption, "She said yes, can't wait for our next adventure at Lauren M." I threw my phone across my childhood bedroom, shattering the screen. Then I sat on my twin bed and sobbed until I couldn't breathe. My mom found me like that, puffy-eyed and broken. She sat beside me, rubbing my back like when I was little. "You really loved him," she said quietly. "No," I corrected through tears. "I really didn't. Not the way he deserved. That's the worst part." She didn't disagree. She just kept rubbing my back, like she knew better than to argue with the truth I had to sit in now. I see clearly now what I couldn't then. Brandon's only crime was loving me too much, trying too hard to make me happy. He planned because he cared. He paid because he could. He structured our lives because he was building a future while I was still acting like we were casually dating. I wanted passion, excitement, spontaneity. I got it with Marco. 48 hours of it before reality crashed in. Turns out passion without foundation is just empty heat. Excitement without security is just anxiety. Spontaneity without commitment is just chaos. Brandon gave me stability, devotion, a partner who put my needs first. I gave him restlessness, ingratitude, and ultimately betrayal. He deserved better. Lauren clearly is better. Someone who appreciates his care instead of feeling suffocated by it, who sees his planning as thoughtfulness instead of control. I work at the same restaurant I did in college now, serving tourists who remind me of myself in Rome. Entitled, oblivious, thinking the world owes them an adventure. I live with my parents at 31, save money I don't have for an apartment I can't afford, and scroll through photos of the life I abandoned. Sometimes I dream about that wine bar, about making a different choice. Finishing my drink alone, going back to the hotel, curling up beside Brandon and being grateful for a man who loved me enough to plan our dreams together. But I didn't. I chose the stranger with pretty words over the partner with proven actions. My friends were right. I was lucky. Brandon was perfect, not because he had no flaws, but because his flaws came from caring too much rather than too little. He treated me like a princess, and I threw a tantrum because I wanted to be a wild child instead. Now, he's building a life with someone who wants what he offers, while I'm stuck in my childhood bedroom, serving pasta to people who don't tip enough, and wondering how I mistook being cherished for being controlled. The irony is perfect. I left to find myself and discovered I didn't like what I found. An ungrateful woman who confused comfort with complacency, devotion with domination. I kept one photo from Italy. Not one of Brandon's carefully composed shots, but a candid he took when I wasn't looking. I'm laughing at something, carefree and content, while he watches from behind the camera with so much love it hurts to see now. That's what I threw away. Not just a relationship, but someone who saw me as beautiful even when I wasn't trying to be. Marco never contacted me again. Of course he didn't. I was just another tourist, another notch, another American girl holding her wine glass too carefully until she learned to let go of all the wrong things. The proposal announcement has over 1,000 likes now. Friends I've lost touch with commenting congratulations, saying they always knew Brandon would find his perfect match. They're right, he did find her. She just wasn't me. I don't blame him for moving on so fast. When you've spent 2 years trying to make someone happy who refuses to be satisfied, finding someone grateful must feel like breathing again. Lauren probably thanks him for planning dates instead of complaining about spontaneity. She probably offers to pay sometimes, making his generosity feel like a gift instead of an obligation. She probably holds his hand in public without checking to see who's watching, kisses him without calculating the moment's Instagram potential. She probably loves him the way he loved me, completely, devotedly, without constantly looking for something better. My shift starts in an hour. I'll put on my apron, smile at customers, pretend I'm not dying inside when they complain about their perfectly good food. Just like I complained about my perfectly good life, until it wasn't mine anymore. Brandon's wedding is in 3 months. I know because Amy accidentally mentioned it, then looked horrified at her slip. Of course I'm not invited. Why would I be? I'm just the ex who cheated in Italy, who threw away the best thing that ever happened to her for a 2-day fling with a photographer who probably doesn't even remember my name. But I remember everything. Every dinner Brandon planned that I called boring. Every gift he chose that I deemed too practical. Every time he said, "I love you," and I responded with, "I know," instead of saying it back. Every moment I had someone who would have done anything for me, and I chose to do nothing for him. I remember standing in that hotel lobby in Rome, my suitcase at my feet, realizing Brandon wasn't coming back, realizing I'd pushed him to a limit I didn't know existed, realizing that sometimes when you test someone's love, you discover exactly where it ends. Mine ended at a wine bar in Rome, choosing a stranger's attention over a partner's devotion. His ended when I made that choice, when he finally understood that loving someone who doesn't want to be loved is just elaborate self-destruction. Brandon will marry Lauren in 3 months, probably at that vineyard he showed me online once while I scrolled through my phone, half listening. They'll have the life he tried to build with me, stable, planned, full of love that goes both directions. Kids who'll grow up with a father who documents every moment and a mother who treasures his attention instead of resenting it. And me? I'll still be here, in my childhood bedroom, serving tables and remembering Italy. Not the romantic parts I thought I was chasing, but the moment I realized I'd mistaken being bored for being trapped, confused contentment for settling, and thrown away something real for something that lasted less time than the flight home. They say you don't know what you have until it's gone, but I think that's wrong. I knew exactly what I had. I just convinced myself I deserved better, different, more. Turns out I deserved exactly what I got, a quick fling with someone who meant nothing, and the loss of someone who meant everything. Brandon paid for that trip to Italy to make me happy. In the end, it was the most expensive lesson of my life. Not in dollars, he covered those, but in everything else. Love, stability, a future with someone who saw me as worth planning for. Now someone else is worth his planning, his saving, his devotion. Someone else gets the spreadsheets and reservations and careful attention I called suffocating. Someone else gets the man who would have given me the world if I'd just been grateful for the corner of it we shared. I was the main character in Brandon's story for 2 years. Now I'm just a cautionary tale, a brief chapter titled, "The Girl Who Wanted More and Ended Up with Nothing." Lauren gets the happily ever after I was too restless to recognize when it was mine. And somewhere in Rome, a photographer named Marco is probably charming another tourist, promising her adventure and meaning nothing by it. Just like I meant nothing. Just like Brandon's love meant nothing to me until it was gone. The saddest part? I'm not even the victim in this story. I'm the villain who destroyed her own happy ending because she couldn't recognize it through all that careful planning and devoted love. I'm the woman who had everything and threw it away for 48 hours of feeling untamed. Now I'm exactly what I chose to be. Unattached, unplanned, unloved. Free to find myself just like I wanted. Turns out myself is a 31-year-old server living with her parents, scrolling through her ex's wedding registry and wondering how she mistook treasure for chains. Brandon was right to leave me in that hotel. Right to change the locks. Right to move on with someone who sees his love as a gift instead of a burden. I played a stupid game and won the stupidest prize of all. The knowledge that I had exactly what I was looking for and was too blind to see it. Italy was beautiful. Marco was exciting. But Brandon was home. and I burned it down for a postcard and a stranger's touch, leaving me with nothing but ashes and the memory of being loved by someone I was too foolish to love back. That's my story. The woman who went to Italy to find herself and lost everything instead. The woman who learned too late that being cherished isn't the same as being controlled. That stability isn't the enemy of passion, and that someone planning your future with you is the deepest form of love there is. Brandon knew that. Lauren knows that. And now, sitting in my childhood bedroom preparing for another shift at a job I swore I'd left behind, I know it too. I found myself in Italy, all right, and it turns out I'm exactly who Brandon finally realized I was. Someone who mistakes love for a cage and only sees the bars after she's flown away. Marco called me untamed. Brandon called me home. One of them lied. The other gave me everything. And I walked away. I keep that photo of me laughing in Rome taped to my mirror, a reminder of who I was when someone still believed I was worth the plan.